Welcome in, folks. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Universe. It is your boy, Jesse Moeller, along with Mr. Jeremy Shulman, and we are talking about those lovely, important, the position we all love in fantasy, the running backs, and we are cooking with gas a little bit more than the tight ends. If you saw our video or the article on it, it was not as exciting. We got through about 4 or 5, and we're like, "Woohoo! This is not like so great." The running backs, there's actually some guys with fantasy like skill set and guys that could be promising for you. So I'm a little bit more excited for this version of the article myself for you. How you doing today, Jeremy?
Yeah, man, all good. It's 10 a.m. at this point over here in Amsterdam. I know it's much later for you out there in the West Coast. So I've had my coffee. I feel well caffeinated, and we just kind of snoozed our way through the tight ends. So why not wake ourselves up and talk about free agent running backs, which are probably a lot more interesting than the incoming rookie class of running backs. So these guys should find homes and should find some fantasy relevance.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. These guys are all getting a boost because the class is pretty lackluster. I get it. Like, we like to talk about who's the RB1, and my whole thought process is like, does it even matter in the rookie class? Like, I legit don't know if it does. Like, we have a 24-year-old Blake Corum, and then we have a bunch of guys who have just serious question marks for their profile. Where we have these NFL who have been like good running backs in the league, and like we talk about Gibson, he's been a top 12 running back twice in his career. So let's like jump into him a little bit. So the projection Aaron has for Antonio Gibson is not a bad contract. It's 2 years, $6 million. He just, for like with the way I look at Antonio Gibson, there's always just something missing where like you want more from him because he has a prototypical build. He's almost the identical size of Jonathan Taylor. He's just not the complete package like Jonathan Taylor is, right? There's a lot to be desired, but I think he's a talented running back. Where do you see him going, and like, are you excited for his fantasy prospects moving forward?
No, I mean, he's for me, like, he's a Clyde Edwards-Helaire level disappointment for fantasy. I mean, CEH was different because he was the 101 in some of your fantasy drafts, and boy, did you swing and miss on that. If you did, and prayers up. We've all had some of those terrible picks just not paying out for us, but. Yeah, for Antonio Gibson, no. I mean, probably the perfect spot is just replacing CEH and whatever CEH was able to do in Kansas City. Jerick McKinnon likely won't come back on a 1-year deal. At least you hope. So
Right.
that could leave things wide open as to operate as, I wouldn't even say the 1B. I won't disparage Pacheco like that, but the 2 behind Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah.
In that case, the offense catching passes, and we know Andy Reid could utilize him in interesting ways. So Kansas City makes a ton of sense. I also like the fit in somewhere like Baltimore. I mean, Antonio Gibson can run between the tackles, and we know Lamar doesn't check down too much, but he is someone who, look, they need somebody back there. And if they're going to go ahead and go out and get like a Derrick Henry type, at least maybe they can, Todd Monken can utilize Antonio Gibson because we know they don't have really any wide receivers there. So at least you can utilize him, maybe move him around the formation and get him out in space. But yeah, I don't think there's too many places he can go where I'll be super excited about.
Yeah, he kind of is what it is with Gibson at this point in his career. He's been in the league long enough. It's like usually guys don't just like come out of nowhere after 2 disappointing back-to-back seasons. They come back and really show us they are. It can happen. Sometimes that happens, the right scheme, the right fit. But his skill set's always going to be him as a wide receiver and playmaker out of the backfield because he was a wide receiver who transitioned to running back, so that's what he's more familiar with. So he's confident with. So yeah, if he gets into like a good offense and he's like the pass catching back, it's just, it's always a pass protection. This dude's like a legit like 225, 230 pounds, and he has question marks about his pass protection. Reminds me a lot of Braylon Allen in that situation, right? Because Braylon Allen can't pass protect either. But yeah, it's just, there's upside with him, but overall, if you want to spend a 3rd round pick for one fantasy, go ahead. I'm not gonna tell you not to, but there's just a lot of question marks, and he could just get buried, and that happens all too often with these running backs. So
yeah, agree.
All right, let's drop it down to a guy who's actually been a lot more reliable in his career if you don't count the injuries. He's a guy that's consistent. He's a good rusher. Mr. Gus Edwards out of Baltimore. He is a little bit older, so he does have that going for him. I know Aaron has him for like a 1-year, $3 million deal.
Yeah.
Like he's just dependable, and I think that's the kind of thing. Unlike Gibson, who has been very up and down in his career, and like he's got in Ron Rivera's doghouse. The Baltimore loved what Gus Edwards did for them. He was really good, and they paired him with J.K. Dobbins, and they had this thing going along. But injuries have kind of caught up when he's a little bit older. Is there anywhere that he could land that you would be happy to see him there and you'd have some interest for fantasy?
No. Again, like the guys on the bottom of this list, like I get it. Look, Gus Edwards is going to get a contract. Will he get $3 million in this RB market? Maybe not, but he'll get a 1-year deal somewhere. Problem is he's 28 years old. Like you said, the injuries have caught up somehow last year, and Baltimore actually figured out in the second half of the year But in the first half of the year, he was trending for the most carries he's ever had in his entire 6-year career. So it was just all going bad for Gus Edwards. Somehow they cut it back significantly. They managed to, get him for a full 17 game season, and he only ran at a 4 yard per carry clip. That was Gus Edwards' calling card back in his first couple of years in the season. He was ripping off 5.5 yards per carry, consistently. But last year, what saved him is the 13 touchdowns. So he's a guy we know can get in the end zone, can punch it in, and especially at 200 and nearly 240 pounds, he is the Gus bus, right? He's a guy who's just gonna punch it in for you. So assuming he doesn't go back to Baltimore, which I don't think he should, he needs to go somewhere where they need to be able to punch it into the end zone. I like 2 spots for contending teams, either the Philadelphia Eagles, who absolutely need that hammer back. Jalen Hurts, we know, is effective around the goal line, but with Jason Kelce retiring, all the talk is the tush push going to be viable still? We'll see. But Gus Edwards would help at least around the goal line. And then the Buffalo Bills, right? Giving Gus Edwards, he had 198 carries last year, giving him 130. Putting him in that Latavius Murray role, that goal line role, and being able to still feature James Cook, which I would love. I know you would love for fantasy.
Don't get me excited.
But yeah, even if he goes somewhere like Buffalo where they need that and can put up double-digit touchdowns again, I'm not excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's just the most likely scenario for him, right? He can find you some touchdowns. He is older. Thankfully, you'd be getting a lot younger if you drop down from Latavius Murray, who was the oldest running back in the league at like 34 years old, right? And you'd be saving like 7 years off it, or 6 years. Sorry, can't do math at this late time for me. But yeah, it's just kind of just a guy that you might keep an eye on, but I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about it for fantasy. Let's drop down to a guy who actually was really good last year and came on the second half of the season. It was like, I think I was reading a stat. He's like one of the few backs in the league that has had 900 yards 5 straight years of time in the league. So like, he's been a guy that's been a playmaker, and I know we don't think he's the most elusive or like the most athletic back, but he's a guy that's just a good NFL running back. And I think I'll leave it at that. That's Devin Singletary. What do you think of like Singletary in this free agent market? Do you think he can get like a sizable deal, or do you think he's just gonna have to take like a veteran minimum and just like latch on with the team?
No, again, Devin Singletary. I mean, look, he had a great season last year, but I think you would agree with me. We're chalking up a lot of these mediocre Texans players, and we're just tagging the CJ Stroud effect and putting them on him. You could call it is it Ben Slowick? You could also call it the Slowick effect as well. But yeah, Devin Singletary was good for fantasy, like you said, the back half of the season. But this is a 5'7", 203-pound back. He's creeping up to 27 years old. He's been in the league 5 years. And even last season, he had his lowest yards per carry and the second lowest receptions of his career. Now, part of that you can chalk up to him not really being the lead guy for the entire season. But he wasn't really that in Buffalo either. So the usage is disappointing to me. Not only the lowest yards per carry, but the lowest yards per reception as well of his career. So at this, his advanced age for running back anyway, he's slowing down a little bit. I don't really know where he lands, but I know that I'm just going to use that as an opportunity to sell him in Dynasty. And, he feels like a Dallas guy, through and through, where he could kind of replace Tony Pollard. But if they want to like feature Rico Dowdle or even bring in like a Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs to pair with them, that would probably be a lot better for reality than it would for fantasy.
Yeah, I think Singletary is a guy that coaching staffs love because he does what you need to do as an NFL running back. He doesn't make mistakes, but like the upside of being a high-end talent just isn't there. But coaching staff love guys that are like, they grind out work, they work hard, and they do everything you need. And that's what Singletary specializes in. Like, he doesn't make mistakes. He does everything you can need. So from an NFL perspective, I think he's a solid add to a running back room. And if you're looking for a cheaper running back, like instead of spending up on Saquon, you go get Singletary for cheaper to fit your scheme. And that's why he was so successful last year in Houston, because he fit the scheme so much better than the guy that apparently did not, Mr. Dameon Pierce, who was just a eternal bust for them last year. So overall, like, I think he's interesting, but like, yeah, I'm with you. It's more than likely he just kind of gets, he's the 1B, or he's like the number 2 guy in a running back room, and maybe he gets an injury, works out from him there. But overall, that's kind of how we like to do it. Let's drop down to a guy, speaking of injuries, Mr. J.K. Dobbins, who has had nothing but them in his NFL career right now. He is a free agent leaving Baltimore. and I really don't know what to expect personally. Do you have any hope for him, or do you think it's just like it's all done at this point? He's
No,
yeah.
pour one out for J.K. Dobbins' fantasy value. He's dynasty dead to me. Like I can't do it anymore. Even if he remains healthy, he's a shell of what he could have been, and it's really a shame because I don't know. A couple of maybe it was a week ago. I don't know if you saw it, but he or his team, whoever, posted a video of him running on a treadmill. He looked really good running in a straight line. The problem is J.K. Dobbins is going to have to move laterally in order to kind of make his money. He's not a burner. And, that's going to be the discussion is, does he have that quick twitch jumping ability? Is he able to kind of cut through holes? And at this stage with just the unfortunate back-to-back injuries, I just don't think it's going to happen for him. So for me, I don't care where he goes. I'm just completely out on J.K. Dobbins. Again, another guy who could find himself in Dallas if he doesn't find himself in Denver or, Minnesota, as a guy who maybe can punch in the end zone, but he's not really that guy anymore.
Well, yeah, and especially with Achilles injuries, like it's multiple years before they get back. We saw Dante Foreman; he's like one of the few guys that's actually come back and been successful in the league. It's just it took him multiple years of basically being out of the league, working his way back in together. Obviously, Dobbins is a higher profile guy. He's still youngish, so that works in his favor. But yeah, I'm with you. It's just speculation. You have no idea where he's gonna end up. And I saw the video of him running, and like you look at the difference in his legs. The left leg's a lot smaller than his right leg, and this is what we saw with Saquon Barkley a few years ago. Like it takes time for the guys to come back. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't really have much hope for Dobbins as much as he was my RB1 coming out of the 2020 class. Injuries have just nuked his career. So I wish him all the best of luck. I hope it works out for him. But fantasy wise, I think it is what it is.
I'm all here for the quad analysis, right? Like Audric Estime, in addition to looking not great at the combine, my dude's quads are super thin. Go back and just check the tape.
Top heavy,
I am concerned about his level of quad development. So I am here. I am all here for the quad analysis.
Right? looking like Robert Turbin back in the day for the Seahawks. The biggest arms on the planet, but just top heavy. That's not what we want from a running back. We want some mass on the bottom. All right, let's jump down to a guy that is a better fit as far as bodybuilding going. That's DeAndre Swift. He's leaving the very good situation in Philadelphia, which kind of negated his biggest issue, which has always been his vision. And like that's always been the thing he struggled with the most. So him going to Philadelphia was really good for him last year. He obviously did not get the touchdowns. I think he was stopped at the 1 yard line 6 times last year. And of course, Jalen Hurts, Mr. Vulture, was like, "Thank you, I'll take it from here." Where's a spot, because Swift's not dealing well with his injuries like someone like J.K. Dobbins is. Where do you think is a place that he could go and be like, not necessarily like an RB1, but somebody who's fantasy viable?
Yeah. We've got a few guys who I think would work well here, a guy further down the list or higher up the list. But I think DeAndre Swift in a place like Houston to get that CJ Stroud effect would be a good transition from him from a place like Philadelphia. We saw with Miles Sanders last year how he completely fell off a cliff. Many of us, not myself included, because I drafted Miles Sanders a little too high, but many in the fantasy community were skeptical of Miles Sanders kind of in his next spot in Carolina. Well done, Jesse. I did not avoid that landmine. But the thing is when you're running behind that Philadelphia offensive line, you look a lot better than you were. All of a sudden, DeAndre Swift's all of his warts disappear and everything that cropped up in Detroit. And he's a viable fantasy commodity now. I hope he lands somewhere halfway decent and I can sell him. But Houston for me would be a place where I would be mildly excited for him. What do you think?
I think that would be fun. I mean, you're pairing him in a good offense that's going to score a lot of points, right? That's what we want. We want those running backs connected to those, because I know we'd love him as a pass catcher, or we have loved his skill set as a pass catcher. He's not the Jahmyr Gibbs of the world, and you see why he's not the Jahmyr Gibbs of the world, because Jahmyr Gibbs came in and like, all right, this is what DeAndre Swift was supposed to be. He kind of neutralized some of those warts in that situation. So I think he's still there. He's like, he's a good back. He's athletic. He does a lot of what you need. It's just he needs a line, or like the analogy for like wide receivers is they need that good quarterback to boost them. It's kind of similar for him as a running back, right? So he goes there, he gets a good fit, and it could work out. I'm always just been a little lower on Swift because of that, just because of the injuries, the vision, it kind of just, one thing after another. But yeah, I think he could be a solid RB2. So if you have him on your roster, I wouldn't be too worried. Or if you want to go out and pay, like a mid-second or whatever it is for him, sure. Like I get it. Like he'll be viable. So 100% with you on that.
Yeah. And there's a couple other spots like Arizona. just makes a lot of sense, I think, and they have a lot of cap space. Another place that has a lot of cap space, and I know some people in the dynasty community love themselves some Chase Brown, but Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow kind of tossing on the rock, that would be interesting as well, especially if Joe Mixon moves on. So.
Yeah, I know we love to talk about Chase Brown season and stuff like that, but if they sign DeAndre Swift, there's no longer a Chase Brown season. Like, that's just how that works. So yeah, if he gets a good offense, I'll be interested. Now this guy on the other hand, yeah, last year was rough. I don't know how else to say it except just like injuries, looking like he was running in slow motion. It was just the explosiveness, the elusiveness, it all seemed to kind of disappear for Austin Eckler last year. And you just saw the lack of just like athletes that offense had, because they had just had all these old guys, him and Keenan Allen, that are just not explosive, and they were like the focal points of the offense. And you saw just how much of a grind struggle it was for Herbert. Speaking of Eckler, do you have any hope from him, or do you see? Because I know he was talking with Matt Harmony, saying like, "I'll be a workhorse back. I'll be a 1A. I'll be a 1B. I'll be whatever a team needs." Do you think a team is willing to? Like, I don't think he'll get brought into a team, but you think anyone's going to invest significant capital or money into him, or they're just kind of just be like, all right, come here, come check it out, see what you got, and we'll roll there.
Yeah, again, no. Like, listen, like you said, he's a vet. He's going to be an amazing locker room presence, someone who can help to develop a room. So he's going to play that role. But if any team is giving him significant money to carry the load, that team is just lost. Right. We have a few lost teams. We have the Washington Commanders, although they do have Brian Robinson, so he wouldn't have to carry the load there. We have the Tennessee Titans, so the my New England Patriots, we got some teams who are a bit lost. So it's possible they could bring him in on a cheap vet deal. But for my money, if anywhere, if you can go anywhere, that would be mildly exciting. It would be one of these top offenses like a Cincinnati, like a Kansas City, just kind of take a cheap deal, catch passes, and do his best to play that third down role, which we know he's great at. But yeah, running between the tackles, that's not in the cards for Austin Eckler anymore. He's a great guy by all accounts. He's got a second career coming in the podcasting and fantasy space if he wants it. So I think he should just collect his money, take a significant role, and go chase a ring. Austin, right? Go after just joining a team who's already set and get yourself a ring and call it a career.
I love that. There's nobody that's harder to work with than Austin Eckler. Yeah. He grew up, he was on a farm, he was living that life, getting up early morning, doing all that stuff. And like, you see it, like you see the workouts he does, this guy's in like peak physical condition, but like when the athleticism goes, and it's tough to be the guy you were previously. So hopefully he makes the adjustments. He ends up in an ideal situation, catches 50 balls for them, whatever, and he wins a championship. Then he rides off to the sunset. I think that would be the best way to go out. Let's talk about another disappointing back, Mr. Tony Pollard, who dealt with injuries last year, tried to play the Ezekiel Elliott role, realized, he was never Ezekiel Elliott. That was probably a bad idea to begin with. And you saw the second half, he kind of came on, even though the first half was just abysmal. It was a disaster. We're kind of just chalking it up to just injuries, and all those things happen with him. Obviously, he's a lot younger, and he doesn't have all of the wear and tear because he's been a part-time player most of his career. Where is a spot you think Pollard can go where he can rejuvenate some of that form, or do you think that's just lost from him? That's no longer in the cards.
Yeah, I think as we heard from him over the back half of the year, he started to feel more like himself physically coming off that injury, which is always good to hear. I think I put some stock into that point. But the other thing, too, is that over the back half of the year, we know that Dallas was playing a bunch of lackluster defenses, and Tony Pollard really wasn't carrying the mail for them. He since week 13 only scored 2 touchdowns on the ground. His yards per carry, and we can chalk some of that up to the Dallas offensive line. His yards per carry weren't that solid either. So for me, Tony Pollard, I think, will bounce back, but he needs to go to an elite team. This is the fit that I really like for the Houston Texans. I think he provides a lot of what Devin Singletary provided, but obviously at a higher level. He's back to peak physical form, and he is 26 years old, so he's a bit on the older side, but he's still got a couple of years left. So if you pair him with C.J. Stroud in that offense in Houston, and we know that they really, with the weapons that they have in Tank Dell, in Nico Collins, they just re-signed Dalton Schultz, right, at tight end. So given those weapons, they don't really need to run the ball and establish it as much as possible. That said, I don't think Tony Pollard should be carrying the load by himself. But in Houston, if he went there, I'd be really excited.
Yeah, I think, and we see this with these elite quarterbacks. They're floor raisers for everybody in the offense, right? So you put Tony Pollard in that CJ Stroud offense, which is like that's going to be dynamite for whoever goes there. And that's just there's fantasy points galore because it's going to be one of the best offenses. They're going to score the most points, and maybe Pollard could look like the 2022 version of him that everybody was so excited going into last year, right? So that's the best case scenario. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen, but like with this running back class, you'll notice how we talk about this, like situation, the quarterbacks, all of that matters for these guys. So if you end up in a good offense and you're a talented player like Tony Pollard, it could work out for you. Now let's go to the big top three, the big dog himself, Mr. Derrick Henry, the guy who's just a turtle that will never die. At some point, it's going to happen, but I don't know. We've been talking like it's 8 years. He's going to fall off. He's not quite there yet. For Henry, I know the time he gave a speech. It looks like he's moving on from Tennessee.
Yeah.
Where do you see like Derrick Henry going?
It just makes too much sense. It's the low hanging fruit, but it's Baltimore, right? Like this is the prototypical, hardball guy to just come in and dominate the touches on offense. Last season, we say he fell off. He still finishes the PPR RB8. He still ran for 1,167 yards and punched in 12 touchdowns, in addition to catching 28 balls. So Derrick Henry still has it, even if it's declining in part. Spending a year, even look, I'm not going to count out the freak that is Derrick Henry and say, he's only got a year left. Who knows? But signing him for a year, even on a 2-year deal in Baltimore, just makes all the sense in the world. Just get that big bodied guy back there. Open up space as well as Lamar Jackson does with his threat to run the ball, and just let this guy rumble and go win a championship. Derrick Henry to Baltimore, it has to happen. Make it happen, Baltimore. Let's go.
Yeah, it's the thing with Henry is like the Titans' offensive line was one of the worst in football last year. It was real difficult for Henry. And I know Spears was like, he looked incredible in the part-time role. This is the Tony Pollard like thing we talk about. Guys in a part-time role, it's a lot easier for them because the defense is changing how they do it. So like keep that in mind with Spears. But yeah, I still think Henry has enough in the bag where if he goes up with a good offensive line, like he can absolutely wear on a defense. So going to Baltimore with Lamar Jackson and those guys behind those big mollies just getting down on it, you could see another 1,300 to 1,500 yard season from him like that. That's in the cards. So I get it. It might seem like he's washed. He's really old. In Dynasty, if you want to scoop him up for a late second or anything like that, go for it. Throw it at him. You ride Henry off into the sunset because you're not going to get the value back in return, but you get the production, and that's what we're looking for. So, if you want to go do that route, go to it.
And I think even if he lands in Baltimore, you can probably get him for early to mid-second, just to ride out the year, potentially too, and go win a championship yourself.
Yeah, I think he's the cheap old RB2 that we cycle through each year, like the guy you're looking for to help, if you have a 0 RB build or anything like that. I think he's one of those guys you target for a year and just ride it out. Similar to the James Conner, all those guys like that, right? All right, now let's get to a guy who's still got some prime years left on him. That's Mr. Josh Jacobs. He did have a pretty bad year if you look at his metrics and everything that fell off because the year before he was a rushing leader, and it just it did not work. It was not an ideal year for Josh Jacobs heading into free agency. So the Raiders seem like they're moving on. I still think he's got play left in the bag personally. I think I'm excited to see where he ends up. Where are the places you would be like excited to see Josh Jacobs go play football?
Yeah, I don't know if there's places that he's going to go where I'm going to be completely excited. I'm excited for the player, but he just feels like a guy where there's a team who feels like there's a couple years away that they're just going to throw the bag at him, and he may take it. So this could be like a Daboll, I want to save my job. We're losing Saquon. Let's go out and get one of the next best guy in free agency kind of move. If he ends up with the Giants, I mean, that's going to be disappointing. I can see him in somewhere like Tennessee as well. They're like, oh, Will Levis, we're going to put weapons around you. And, it's going to depend on exactly how much money these teams have. But, Washington is another place. And, we're going to, I just feel like, and it pains me, but I feel like Josh Jacobs is just going to be mired on another terrible team. And let's put last year, like you mentioned, into context. Josh McDaniels fired mid-season. Antonio Pierce coming in doing the best he could do. Aiden O'Connell running the show for a while there. It was just a complete disaster for the Raiders last season. So much so that like Devontae Adams was like excited and like had youthfulness in his step once McDaniels was shown the door. So who's like one of the nicest guys, at least seemingly, Devontae Adams. So, you just hope that he can rebound from that situation and the PPR 28 finish that he earned last season. He's got the talent to do so, but if he lands on one of those middling teams, I don't know. I think best case scenario is probably Buffalo.
Yep. That would suck for James Cook because that's really going to significantly impact what James Cook does. But yeah, the interesting thing with Jacobs, he's never had below 250 touches in his career. And he's been in the league a while, and he's getting that work. So wherever he goes, like I think he's very much going to be fed and fed heavily. So like if you have him in Dynasty, I wouldn't worry too much about him. His market's pretty cratered right now because people don't know where he's going to sign up. I mean, obviously, if he goes to the Giants, it's not great, but it'll be similar to Saquon last year, where it was a volume play. You're like, all right, he's getting 250 to 300 touches. Like, you just write it out and go with there. But yeah, I'm with you. There's some actual like more fun offenses. I think that would be a little more interesting than say like the Giants or anything like that.
And I haven't mentioned it yet in this podcast just because I've been, it's been flying over my head and I've just missed it. But the Minnesota Vikings, right, would be a really good fit for any of these guys. Josh Jacobs, I think, especially pair him with Ty Chandler, give Chandler 120 touches, let Jacobs carry the rest. If you're bringing back Kirk Cousins or another vet, I don't know who else outside of Kirk Cousins would be a great fit. But if you manage to bring back Kirk Cousins, pair him with Josh Jacobs in that offense, I mean, that's truly elite right there.
Yeah, I think that would be a heck of a lot of fun. You could see where he leads the league in touchdowns with that offense with Kirk Cousins. Like that's in the range of outcomes with him. It's just because he's that good of a player. Now let's jump to the guy that everybody knows and loves, and that's Mr. Saquon Barkley, the guy who was the second overall pick back in the day, who has just been a workhorse. He's dealt with injuries. He's had some issues throughout his time there. It's just been a really bad situation the past couple of years. But, he's getting by and he's doing the work just enough. So, personally, I want to see Saquon Barkley in a good offense and what that looks like for him, where he's not so dependent on, like, I think one game he had 41 carries last year, and I'm just like, what the hell are you doing to this man? Like, don't break this guy. Let us have him longer than that. But yeah, I mean, they just didn't have anybody else there. They had a broken Darren Waller or no one else. So like, I get it. For Saquon Barkley, where like we talk about these good offenses, is there an offense in particular that you like the most for him?
Yeah, I mean, he's the top commodity on the market by far just because of age and production. The only time Saquon hasn't produced is when he hurt himself, right? And getting him away from the New York Giants. Some people are saying, maybe they re-sign him. Getting him away from the New York Giants is his best case scenario. I would love to see him potentially Minnesota, but I think where it makes the most sense for him, where it makes most sense for this team, and where it makes the most sense for fantasy is put him in Philadelphia, right? He gets to stick it to the Giants twice a year. He still gets to play a MetLife. And he gets to work in one of the best offenses in football. Now, does that mean he's going to see incredible volume? No, we know Jalen Hurts kind of takes some of that away. But he's kind of in the Derrick Henry camp of, he can still be efficient with just his rushing yards. So any sort of passing volume that he gets is icing on the cake. I think if you want to talk about a better fit, it would be a Houston, right? Where he can just dominate touches there. But in terms of what's actually going to happen, I think Philadelphia just makes too much sense.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with like Houston is they like to run the ball. Like Bobby Slowick, that's one thing he likes to do, and it's something we kind of complained about. But like, if you're putting someone as talented as Saquon Barkley back there, like good things can happen in that offense because they're going to focus heavily on Stroud, Nico, Tank Dell, and even Dalton Schultz. But yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I just want, like we talk about, just good offense. Just put him in a good offense. We'll see what happens from there. It'll be fun. He's basically a lock, barring injury, to be a top 12 running back. Like you know the type of player he is, right? So I think he's the other guy that rounds it. Is there after we finish this list, is there anybody outside the top 10 that comes to your mind of some like a running back that might be able to make a viable impact somewhere?
That's a great question, and I'm going to look up the running back free agents now.
I'll throw a name at you. What do you think about Zach Moss landing somewhere? How does that name sound to you?
Yeah, I think I'm holding Zach Moss on a few teams just because he looked so good last year. I mean, Zach Moss took a while to develop on the Buffalo Bills, and then all of a sudden just broke out in the last couple of years here when he found time to just jump in the full-time role with injuries. So I like Zach Moss wherever he goes. If he goes somewhere like Dallas, I'll be super interested. He feels like a good Dallas fit. If he goes somewhere like I don't know, maybe Green Bay. We talk about the AJ Dillon replacement. that would be interesting too, because we know Aaron Jones, as good as he is, should receive that Austin Eckler prayer
Some
treatment of
point.
like, just give me less touches so I can make more money and contribute. So that's an interesting team, Green Bay, who we haven't really talked about, who should be in the market for one of these guys. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm looking at other guys like Cordell Patterson doesn't interest me, although he very well could find himself on the Steelers when it's all said and done, reuniting with Arthur Smith yet again. Alexander Madison, no, that experiment didn't work. CEH, who we talked about earlier, could be interesting, but he's not going to get the full load yet. None of these guys are really going to see a workload, I think, that's going to matter. We just mentioned AJ Dillon, right? He's probably number 11 or number 12 on this list, and fortunately, who cares? That's a big guy who just was never able to put it together.
Yeah, I think the one guy out of like the other bucket of guys is kind of like, yeah, maybe it's like Zeke Elliott, like he'll get touches, like that's just what he did. Even with Ramondre, like he still came in and played a role. So like it's not going to be high end stuff, but like if you're chasing and you need a flex guy on occasion, I think you can find Zeke at the right situation. Like, maybe that'll work out. But like as you can see, this running back list, a hell of a lot more promising than the tight end list that we just covered. It's like, okay, there's guys, and it's getting boosted up by a weaker running back class. So I'm very curious to see how these values translate for this running back class, and maybe we'll see the flip side where guys actually get paid for like the first time in what feels like 5-6 years, right? So
that'd be good.
It's just interesting. But I think that's gonna wrap it up for our running back edition of Free Agency Market. If you want to check out this article or any other ones, go to the Fantasy Football Universe. This one's done by Aaron. It's put together, and we'll have just a bunch of them coming out. Check it out, on the show on YouTube, all the things we got coming on forward with like the free agency, and then we get more into the draft and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming in, for checking this one out. And we will, we got all sorts of more things coming out, mock drafts nonstop. We're doing those. We have some cool little designs and ideas kicking in the future as we get onto that. So I just wanted to thank you all for joining us. For Aaron and Jesse, I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we will see you later, folks.